Today is May 1st, 1992. The subject of this video message is the UNCED Earth Summit, the meeting which is to begin on June 1st, 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. The acronym UNCED stands for the United Nations Committee for Environment and Development. It is pronounced UNCED, and perhaps indicating the secret agenda of this meeting. This is the logo of the Earth Summit. This is not a dove in their Earth Summit logo. It is a hand, and the hand is holding the world with the slogan, "In our hands," alongside of it. In whose hands? Who is the we in this motto? The hands of the world order. These elitists convened this UNCED meeting in the first place, and for a bad purpose. This video will show strong evidence that the persons running the UNCED Earth Summit are actually setting a net to place the power over the Earth and its peoples into their hands. Brave, bold deeds by the citizenry are needed quickly. Once a government signs their treaties, their citizens are, de jure, in the hands of the world order. There's that motto again, in our hands. Whose hands? The same world order families that planned World War I and World War II, that tricked the third world countries to borrow funds and rack up enormous debts. The same world order that stole much of the money borrowed by Africans and other nations and hid it in Geneva banks. They are the persons who financed Hitler, manufactured the Holocaust, and managed to blame the terrible deeds on the German people. They can be credited with manipulating famines in Ethiopia and elsewhere, and purposely creating war and debt to bring societies into their control. The world order crowd are not a nice group of people. My name is George Hunt. I'm speaking to you from a video studio in Boulder, Colorado. I have attended some of the meetings and caucuses leading to the UNCED Earth Summit. I am a business consultant and a college teacher in small business management. I own an environment company too, and am very familiar with the environment hypocrisy that the world order crowd has taken over the environment movement. I am aware of their plans. Please pardon me as I read my script. I'm not a professional actor, and my memory will not serve me with the things that I want to say. The world environment movement will soon be in the hands of the world order if you and others do not respond with action after you view this videotape. Action may constitute showing this to 5 others. It may constitute showing it to a judge down the street or a city councilman who you know in your town. Pray for guidance, hoping that something good might come of your actions. Somebody is going to set the spark off. I really feel that it is not too late. When I served as an official host at a key environment meeting in Denver, Colorado in 1987, I was surprised to see David Rockefeller, Edmund de Rothschild, Secretary of State Baker, then Secretary of the Treasury, Maurice Strong, Waste Company Chairman and EPA Administrator William Ruckelshaus, UN Secretary General in Geneva McNeil, and various World Bank and IMF officials there. What were the rich elite and bankers doing at an environment congress? Listen carefully. I will now attempt to show you how their enactments will work against you. Trust and foundation income is the cornerstone of the world order. They command politicians to do their bidding, and presidents, judges, and legislators lick their boots. Their swollen egos and bellies are never satisfied, and their lust for more is insatiable. Now world power and authority is in their grasp. Are we going to give it to them without a confrontation? Or, like they did to the Germans, will they blame the environment holocaust on you and get away with it? What is the World Summit meeting, and who is behind it? The UNCED World Summit, that's UNCED World Summit, is a key event in a series of environment meetings which have occurred since 1972. Maurice Strong, a UN official and an employee of the Rockefeller and Rothschild Trusts and Projects, convened the first Congress in Stockholm, Sweden in 1972. 20 years later, Maurice Strong is the Secretary General and convener of UNCED. In the 1970s and 1980s, numerous conferences created political action decrees, eventually to lead to the UNCED Earth Summit. I attended 2 meetings in Colorado in 1987 and 1991. Friends attended others in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Des Moines. Here is a paper from the Des Moines meeting where Maurice Strong was in charge. Representative Gephardt's telephone number appears on the meeting documents. Here are some phrases from the document of the Secretariat for World Order, which were distributed at the Des Moines UNCED meeting. We are the living sponsors of the great Cecil Rhodes' will of 1877, in which Rhodes devoted his fortune to the extension of British rule throughout the world and colonization by British subjects of the entire continent of Africa, the Holy Land, the valley of the Euphrates, the islands of Cyprus and Candia, the whole of South America, the islands of the Pacific not heretofore possessed by Great Britain, the whole of the Malay archipelago, the seaboard of China and Japan, the ultimate recovery of the United States of America as an integral part of the British Empire. We stand with Lord Milner's credo. We too are British race patriots, and our patriotism is the speech, the traditions, the principles, the aspirations of the British race. Do you fear to take this stand at the very last moment when this purpose can be realized? Do you not see that failure now is to be pulled down by the billions of Lilliputians of lesser race who care little or nothing for the Anglo-Saxon system? Copies of this document are distributed to you with this videotape. At the Fourth World Congress meeting in 1987, some other bad remarks about common people were made. I'm going to play them for you now. For instance, here is David Lang, a Montreal international investment banker, one of their pack, decreeing that these environment and economic activities of the world order not be shared with the public. He calls us cannon fodder. Listen to this.
I suggest, therefore, that this be sold not through a democratic process. That would take too long and devour far too much of the funds to educate the cannon fodder, unfortunately, which populates the earth. We have to take almost an elitist program that we can see beyond our swollen bellies and look to the future in time frames and in results which are not easily understood or which can be, with intellectual honesty, be reduced down to some kind of simplistic definition.
Does it make you feel uncomfortable that the arrogant rich are close to complete rule over the United States, Canada, and other countries? Here's more. The decrees leading to the Earth Summit were dictated without debate or opportunity for dissent. The treaties the world order once signed at UNCED will supersede national laws. Yet I saw the major decrees at the Fourth World Congress dictated into existence by Edmund de Rothschild. You can hear it too. Listen to him dictate. Rothschild got these major decrees into the United Nations resolutions without debate or challenge.
But perhaps this conference might like to think more about the Marshall Plan, which had been mooted and put forward very tentatively at the Denver conference. And perhaps this might be the keynote of what you have heard today and what perhaps you might like in some perhaps amended form to have put forward. At this conference, recognizing the needs to protect our ecological and environmental heritage within the concept of the World Wilderness Congress, World Wildlife Fund, and all other bodies involved in the preservation of life on our planet, asked the Prime Minister of Norway, Right Honourable the Gro Harlem Brundtland, as one of the world's leaders of a greatly respected community, to be the promoter of this International Conservation Bank. By her Brookland report, which has been widely circulated to world leaders, she could follow up this report with the recommendations to promote a second Marshall Plan, the third world debt relief, and finance for a stable development.
Nobody at that caucus mentioned a second world Marshall Plan or a new currency system to finance a stable development. The World Conservation Bank had not been thoroughly discussed at all. I was denied the opportunity to openly challenge Rothschild's remarks at the caucus by the World Conservation Bank president and meeting chairman, I. Michael Sweetman. In world politics, the names of First World, Second World, Third World, and Fourth World are used to describe blocks of political entities. The First World is the capitalist countries of Europe and North America. They are industrial and are, therefore, the world's biggest polluters. The Second World is the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries. Do you remember Rothschild referring to a Second World Marshall Plan? He was speaking of the Soviet bloc countries, not a second Marshall Plan. He was speaking of the Soviet bloc countries and that they will be rescued by First World money. Europe was granted huge sums of money by the Marshall Plan in 1949, and the Second World will receive billions of North American money in this repeat performance. And guess what banking family will act as the main money changers for the Russian ruble, possibly absconding with billions? The Rothschild Group, of course. Rothschild made these remarks back in 1987, 2 years before the Berlin Wall was torn down. He was bragging to us that he knew the Soviet regime would collapse. Here are some April 1992 news articles about the progress of Rothschild's Second World Marshall Plan. They come from the New York Times, and the world order is right on time. Here is a April 15th, 1992 New York Times headline. $44 billion needed to aid ex-Soviets in 1992, IMF says. It's needed for a shift to the free market. Most of the help would finance imports of food and spare parts for 15 republics. My response to that is, sure. Another article in the international edition of the New York Times, Wednesday, April 29th, 1992, had this to say about Rothschild's Marshall Plan. Although there has been much talk about building a new political order in the post-Cold War world, the events here in the last few days make clear that a new economic order is also rapidly emerging. Washington cannot bankroll a Marshall Plan for the former Soviet republics because the task is so enormous and because the American economy is debt-ridden and no longer so dominant. That is why Washington has asked the IMF to run the rescue operations, which are expected to cost $44 billion this year. Well, Rothschild really called it, didn't he? Soon after these remarks were made, the Rothschilds reopened the Rothschild Bank in Frankfurt, Germany, after 50 years of closure. They are now conveniently available to stabilize the Russian ruble with money from the West. Question: do we really want to send North American money abroad so the Rothschilds can make multi-billion-dollar windfalls on the currency trades? Let's talk about the Third World now. The Third World are those countries who have emerged since World War II. Young and easily fooled, the World Bank under Robert S. McNamara played bad tricks on them, spiriting billions of loan dollars back to Swiss bank accounts through fictitious African addresses. They now owe $1.5 trillion to the world banking system with nothing to show for it except poverty and cruel loan collections. Maurice Strong has suggested an ominous scenario at the UNCED meeting, which could break out if his words are to be believed. He says in this article in West magazine that a fight may erupt between the first world polluters and the third world poor. Here is how he describes it. Each year, he explains as background to the telling of his novel's plot, the World Economic Forum convenes in Davos, Switzerland. Over 1,000 CEOs, prime ministers, finance ministers, and leading academics gather in February to attend meetings and set economic agendas for the year ahead. With this as a setting, Maurice Strong then says, what if a small group of these world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the earth comes from the actions of the rich countries? And if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement reducing their impact on the environment. Will they do it? He's really talking about the UNCED meeting. And Strong, driving as I take notes, looks at me. Then his eyes go back to Highway 17 on the way from Alamosa, Colorado to his New Age ranch in Crestone, Colorado. He says, the man who founded the United Nations Environment Program and who wrote parts of the Brundtland Report and who in 1992 will try to get the world's leaders meeting in Brazil to sign just such an agreement savors the questions hanging in the air. Will they do it? Will the rich countries agree to reduce their impact on the environment? Will they agree to save the earth? Strong resumes his story. The group's conclusion is no. The rich countries won't do it. They won't change. So, in order to save the planet, the group decides, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? This group of world leaders, he continues, form a secret society to bring about an economic collapse. It's February. They're all at Davos. These aren't terrorists. They're world leaders. They have positioned themselves in the world's commodity and stock markets. They've engineered, using their access to stock exchanges and computers and gold supplies, a panic. Then they prevent the world stock market from closing. They jam the gears. They hire mercenaries who hold the rest of the world leaders at Davos as hostages. The markets can't close. The rich countries, and Strong makes a slight motion with his fingers as if he were flicking a cigarette butt out the window. I sit there spellbound. This is not any storyteller talking. This is Maurice Strong. He knows these world leaders. He is, in fact, co-chairman of the Council of the World Economic Forum. He sits at the fulcrum of power. He is in a position to do it. I probably shouldn't be saying things like this, he says. Highway 17 cuts straight across the desert, heading out of the land of dreams. When the truth is finally told, Maurice Strong fears the world will come to this. No secret societies, no hostage takings at Davos, but it will come to the same conclusion. The global economy, sapped by credit and debt loads and environmental disasters, will simply come unstuck. And nothing, not even the inspiration of the Baka, can save humankind from itself. They see the struggles and problems at the Baka as reflections of the problems assaulting the planet. They fear the Baka will be, at best, an oasis in the desert of the future, and at worst, a place where dreams die. Even if Strong is fictionalizing and imagining, why would he even suggest these things? The point remains, something important is going to happen at the UNCED Earth Summit. The fourth world. No one really talks about the fourth world, do they? That's because we haven't seen the fourth world come about. The fourth world came up in the title of the Congress I attended. It was called the Fourth World Wilderness Congress. Maurice Strong said it was called the Fourth World because it was the fourth one of these environment congresses that Edmund de Rothschild had created. I learned later that the world order refers to the coming one world government as the Fourth World. World control by the world order, where there is no more first, second, and third world. Just a boundaryless planet which is called the fourth world wilderness. Yogis and shamans refer to it as the fourth world wilderness, the lostness of the mind. The lostness of the mind refers to the collective consciousness. Persons will be coerced through lies, drugs, fear, and pain to surrender themselves, their egos, to the collective consciousness. The fourth world will be a return to a society much like the Caesars or Babylon or the Fourth Reich. Within the fictionalized societies described in Huxley's Brave New World and Brave New World Revisited and Orwell's classic 1984. We will flourish with only a whimper. The world order wants to create a new society out of the ashes of chaos. A collectivist fourth world complete with a collectivist religion, collectivist finance, and unchecked world national socialism. The world order will offer Gaia, Mother Earth, to the masses as the Big Brother image to worship in the fourth world. Maurice Strong has already set up a 140,000-acre project in Crestone, Colorado, to develop this Earth religion system. Projects are funded by the Rockefeller Fund, among other foundations. The Earth Summit will link environment with industry. The lords of the UNCED conference will be the masters of who gets what and when if we don't do something about it quickly. Who leads the environment movement? The convener of the summit, Maurice Strong, identifies Baron Edmund de Rothschild as the creator of the environment movement. Here are his own words describing Rothschild as the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand and growth and development on the other. Listen carefully as Maurice Strong introduces Baron de Rothschild.
So there is no better person. He epitomizes in his own life that positive synthesis between environment, conservation on the one hand, and economics on the other. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity of introducing to you Edmund de Rothschild.
Maurice, thank you very much indeed for all that you've said, and I would ask the audience to take with a slight grain of salt all that he has said about me.
Rothschild is the positive synthesis of environment on the one hand, that's the thesis, and growth and development on the other, that's the antithesis. He very clearly admits that the Rothschild combination, including the Rockefellers and most world capitalists, aim to control the environment and development movement as the synthesis. Power will converge into their hands through the Rio Conference. The synthesis, the head of the power, merges into the House of Rothschild. Another speaker at the Fourth World Conference was David Rockefeller, world energy capitalist and banker. He was named Mr. Growth and Development at the meeting. His counterpart, William Ruckelshaus, organizer of the EPA and creator of its laws under Presidents Ford and Reagan, was dubbed Mr. Environment. Here is a picture of the chuckling antagonist at the meeting. Mr. Environment Ruckelshaus is the CEO and chairman of the board for BFI, Browning Ferris Industries, one of the largest private environment companies in the world. The hypocrisy is that Ruckelshaus, as EPA chief, made the very laws by which his waste company, BFI, is becoming rich. Hypocrisy number two is that Ruckelshaus and Maurice Strong were key investors in American Water Development, a company which tried to circumvent Colorado water laws and gain control of one of the largest underground reservoirs of water in the world. Here's an excerpt from a video interview where I explain what they did. And I did a survey of the people down in the San Luis Valley, and I sent letters out to these farmers last December, and I said, what will happen if Maurice Strong and William Ruckelshaus and others pull water, 200,000 acre-feet of water out of the San Luis Valley without one hesitation? It was unanimous that their land will turn into a wasteland. It'll turn into a desert. So here we have people at an Environment Congress that are then waltzing 200 miles south of Estes Park down in the San Luis Valley of Colorado that want to suck the aquifers dry and turn it into a desert. The hypocrisy is so deep. They failed in their attempt because the people learned what they were doing and defeated them. Here is a newspaper article that shows their defeat. I hope we can do it again around the UNCED meeting. Let's hear a little more from Maurice Strong and Edmund de Rothschild and lock in on what kind of people are running the UNCED summit meeting. Here's the part where Rothschild says that projects launched to save the environment will be inoperative. He says it quickly, but he says inoperative. That is, they will not work. And listen to Rothschild snidely suggest that we build dry ice machines and ship up the dry ice to the North and South Poles to keep them from melting.
Perhaps it could be possible to utilize CO2, carbon dioxide, one of its main causes, to manufacture dry ice, to maintain the polar caps and the actual temperature of the ice there, and maintain their present temperature. Innovative and modern technology, world waste material, collected and perhaps burnt in volcanic areas or buried so deep in the earth, in the wilderness desert areas of the mid-Sahara where nobody goes, or in the empty quarter in Arabia or the Gobi Desert. But all these ideas and visions, some far-fetched, and above all, the continuation of this Congress needs money.
I will play the full speech after this video, and you will hear him say that the world order has these problems. Its indigenous people and its wildlife. People and wild animals are problems? What kind of madness are these world order Caesars afflicted with? I hope I have given you enough information to expose the designs of the world order crowd. They hope to run the lives of people for generations to come. They are the same crowd who created a Hitler, arranged the assassination of Lincoln and Kennedy, and have indicated elsewhere that they want to drastically reduce the population of the world to make environment and development more sustainable. Please quickly carry the truth to others. This video has photocopy exhibits accompanying it too, and you can make unaltered copies of this videotape as much as you please. Large quantities can be ordered at $8 a piece, including photocopied materials, plus postage, until July 4th, 1992. Send your orders and checks to this address. If you want to talk, I will call you collect. So send me your phone number. The light of freedom is going out throughout the world. You know who the culprits are now. It may not be too late to educate key people who can stop them. And you, watching this videotape, are one of the sparks that may ignite the countryside into flames of indignation against these people. Perhaps society still has some leaders that won't let us down. Goodbye and God bless you.
So let's get the proceedings running now, and we will see how we go. Thank you. Mr. Maurice Strong, whom most of you already know.
Thank you very much, and you've already heard perhaps too much from me, so I think we're reaching the point at which we want to involve you, all of you, in the next step of this conference, which is really to come to grips with some of the principal action-oriented issues. And one of the most important initiatives that is open here for your consideration is that of the Conservation Banking Program. As we mentioned this morning, we have as our chairman, fortunately, the person who really is the source of this very significant concept. He is one of the trustees of the International Wilderness Foundation, which sponsored this meeting. He was at the first of these congresses. So his conversion to the relationship between conservation and economic development has been a pioneering one. Is work on mini dams. I used to be in the hydroelectric power part of the energy business myself. Many of the energy developments that we've seen have come from his early anticipation of our energy needs and his early work in supporting pioneering initiatives to deal with these needs. So there is no better person. He epitomizes in his own life that positive synthesis between environment, conservation on the one hand, and economics on the other. And I'm just delighted to have this opportunity of introducing to you Edmund de Rothschild.
Morris, thank you very much indeed for all that you've said, and I would ask the audience to take with a slight grain of salt all that he has said about me. And I want to start there a little bit of my talk to you on a somewhat different vein. You see, in order to further the ideals of the world wilderness concept and to prevent the concept and this concept just to remain an ideal, it is of paramount importance to find ways and means of finding and promoting its rationale. There are these ways and means of putting this concept into effect and overcoming or minimizing some of the problems set out by the speakers in this Congress, such as pollution, prevention of acid rain, waste disposal. There are alternative methods and harmless alternative methods for energy, and they're available. Alternative uses of water resources not involving vast inundations of land or displacing humans and its indigent wildlife, harnessing wave energy, solar energy, wind power, just to mention a few. To overcome the chilling, doom-laden prognostications of Dr. Irving Mintzer's greenhouse effect, perhaps it could be possible to utilize CO2, carbon dioxide, one of its main causes, to manufacture dry ice, to maintain the polar caps and the actual temperature of the ice there, and maintain their present temperature. Innovative and modern technology, world waste material, collected and perhaps burnt in volcanic areas or buried so deep in the earth, in the wilderness desert areas of the mid-Sahara where nobody goes, or in the empty quarter in Arabia or the Gobi Desert. But all these ideas and visions, some far-fetched, and above all, the continuation of this Congress needs money. A start has been made by the thoughts and care of one man. Michael Sweetman. His ideas have had lip service paid to them by some of our speakers here during the Denver conference. The meetings now of the new concept of an international conservation banking program involves all sectors of the human community, governmental and intergovernmental agencies, the public and private agencies, large charitable foundations, as well as ordinary individuals worldwide. Michael Sweetman has written the foreword to this concept. Its final form will no doubt be altered, watered down, or widened. But this convention must put forward this charter. And with the collective wisdom available here today, the charter can be enhanced, embracing those who have given their thoughts in the Denver Public Forum. By thinking forward as to how to reach out to the public at large, to every corporate entity throughout the world, to put aside, hopefully tax-free, a part of their profits to fund our ecological and environmental protection. Ladies and gentlemen, every country has its own problems, its indigenous peoples and its wildlife. This International Conservation Bank must know no frontiers, no boundaries. Its funds must be used constructively and not to be challenged into greedy hands or weapons of destruction. I hesitate to link this bank with world wilderness, but I would like to link it with our survival as a human race. This, our generation, must not be cursed by our descendants, if we have any, as to the greatest destructors and squanderers of the world's resources. That great philosopher and cleric, Teilhard de Chardin, wrote, and I quote, "Man can harness the winds, the waves, and the tides. But when he can harness the energy of love, then for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire." Michael Sweetman. Michael Sweetman, your love for the world wilderness concept has given you the necessary fire in your belly to produce the germ of the future needs of this concept. And I have great pleasure in asking you to put it forward.
And that was Maurice Strong introducing Edmund de Rothschild at the 1992 UNCED conference. And this is Gnostic Media Research and Publishing's podcast episode number 135. I'm your host, Jan Irvin. This episode is an interview with George Hunt titled Say What Is Unsaid, The Elite and the Environmental Movement, and is being released on Tuesday, January 31st, 2012. My interview with George was recorded on Monday, January 30th, 2012. And this is the last day of the month of January and the last show, and thank you for your patience, and I'm sorry for not getting a show out last week, but I've got a good one for you here today. And George Washington Hunt served as a naval officer on cruisers and destroyers, held corporate positions for 8 years, and worked as an entrepreneur in the health industry. He taught small business management and accounting as an adjunct professor at a college level for 5 years and started a health corporation in 1991, which became very profitable. He then sold it and has been retired for 3 years as of 2009. He was also a dedicated conservationist and in turn lost a career business because he stood up for nature. Mr. Hunt is here to inform everyone of the concept of the Big Bad Bank, which is ready for implementation whenever the directors feel the right time occurs, probably after all of the world's currency systems fail and there is chaos everywhere. It is presently called the World Conservation Bank, but may be open in the name of the United Nations or as a private Rothschild bank. The bank will replace all other banks. There will be one big bank. It will issue the world currency, make loans, and finance huge conservation programs. Its power will be great and could bring any nation to its knees just by adjustments to credit and currency. And you can find out more about George Hunt's work at thebigbadbank.com, and also check out the UNCED video from George that he actually put out in 1992, which is posted to the show notes for this episode, as well as some other notes that are posted there that you'll be interested in reading. And upcoming shows, I have no ideas who's next. It may be Dr. Jason Martineau back for another episode on music, or Peter Gorman, or Robert Forty, or a number of others. Things have been quite hectic lately. And donations. This episode is dedicated to Scott, Arthur, Benjamin, Kim, Bew, John, Tavis, Tino, Jeremy, Angela, Brent, Aaron, Samuel, John, and Eric. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate all of your help. And also, regarding donations, there is the donation widget up on the Gnostic Media website for the Gordon Wasson Secret History of Magic Mushrooms book project, or book and movie project, that I've been working on for a number of years. And I'm hoping to raise as much money for that to be able to get out to New York to finish some of the research on that, or New York and Boston for that matter, as well as be able to work on putting a video together on that project and have the time to sit down and finish the book. So your donations are greatly appreciated on that project. And there's still a few equipment purchases that we need for those of you who can donate towards that. We still need a monitor, we still need hard drives and a couple of other things. And this show is run on donations and our website sales. This is not corporate media, but independent media in the truest sense of the words. And by donating or ordering one of the books or DVDs or the She Who Remembers audio archives, a t-shirt, or the Gnostic Media archives up there on the website, you help to continue this unprogramming. And of course, we greatly appreciate your support. And the views expressed by the authors and guests of this unprogram are their own and are not necessarily those held by myself, the host, or Gnostic Media. You can check out the website at www.gnosticmedia.com. That's GNOSTIC media.com. And you can contact me directly through the web form on the website or at contact@gnosticmedia.com. Thanks for listening, and thank you for your support. And here is my interview with George Hunt. Enjoy. Well, George, welcome to the Gnostic Media Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. It's cloudy and cool here in Colorado, and but I'm in good shape. Thanks for including me into your network of friends, and I think that we might have a good conversation together.
All right, well, why don't you start off, George, by telling us a little bit about yourself, your educational background, and how you got into your line of research.
Well, back in 1971, a doctor who I was the consultant for, I used to consult for physicians in the healthcare facilities, he said, there's a conspiracy going on. And I listened to him and I said, oh, come on. And he said, well, here, take this record. And it was by a chap, I can't recall his name, but I will. And he also gave me that book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And I read it and I said, this couldn't be true. And I looked into it, and over the months, I began researching and found out, to my own knowledge, that there was a conspiracy to take over the world. It's now called the New World Order, but back then I just called it a conspiracy. And then about 12 years later, by some miraculous incident, I went to the Fourth World Wilderness Congress in 1987, where David Rockefeller was there, Edmund de Rothschild, the head of the IMF, all of the World Bank people.
How did you end up getting going to that?
Well, my son had been killed a year earlier in the wilderness in a skiing accident, and I was still feeling really blue about it, and I saw this advertisement about this conservation meeting that they were going to have in Denver, and they had pictures of reindeer on the television and stuff. And I said, I ought to go to that thing. My son, my younger son, had wanted to go up to the Arctic and build huts and things like that for the rangers up there. So I decided to go. Maybe I could get my son a job. And when I got there, I learned that there was a secret meeting not a secret meeting, but one that people wouldn't go to, up in Estes Park, Colorado. And at that meeting, Edmund de Rothschild pronounced that the United Nations was going to take over water and food and a big bank, one bank that would make currency for the world. And I learned all that, got a copy of the meeting, a taped copy, and began to tell people about what I had learned. And lo and behold, my investigations caught hold, and pretty soon there was a contingent of people in the United States that was listening to me. It was through the Christian Christian media at the time. So it turns out I went to I also found out that one of the official hosts at the meeting was sick with the flu, and he couldn't make it, and I had a car that I could pick up the dignitaries that were coming in to Denver for this meeting, and so the committee for the Rothschild Group appointed me as an official host, and I could ask any questions I wanted to at the meetings. I could go anywhere, and they would give me a straight answer because I was an official host. And so I learned that there was a conspiracy, and I asked a lot of questions. I had luncheon with the Rothschilds, as a matter of fact, and that's how I wound up knowing what I know today, and I know that there is a conspiracy. It's now not a theory, it's fact because of my reports. So that's kind of a background. I don't know if I gave you enough background. You want to ask me some more questions about that?
Well, what's your educational background for those wondering?
Oh, okay. I have a Bachelor of Science in business, finance, and a Master's in finance, and a PhD in healthcare administration. I got the PhD all over the internet, so it wasn't one of those complete ones that you get in a university. But I was also a college professor, adjunct. I would come into Metropolitan State College in Denver and taught small business management and accounting. And let's see, what else? And I also have run my own corporation in the environment, medical environment. And let's see, I guess that's about it. I'm educated mostly in the world of experience, actually, and I know what is going on. I don't want to blow my own horn, but I know because I know.
When did you become aware that the bank was being created at this wilderness? And for that matter, what was the bank?
The bank was called the World Conservation Bank, and it was headed by Michael Sweetman. And if people go to my site, thebigbadbank.com, that's THE, bigbadbank.com, they will hear Rothschild pronouncing the bank and pronouncing Michael Sweetman as the head of this bank that nobody has seen, but we know is there nowadays. And Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Prime Minister of Norway and the head of World Health Organization, was there. She was given the pronouncements by Rothschild that a world banking program would be established, and that this program that we're talking about today was going into the creation. And that was in 1987. And nowadays we have a banking system that essentially is a world banking system. The dollar is still afloat as the denomination that capital is measured in around the world, but he has established a world bank, and the only thing they need to do now is to announce it and then start making their own money. And they'll replace the local soft currencies around the world with a hard currency, we think. Actually, it'll be as phony as the dollar is today. But they'll establish world peace and happiness, shall we say, by creating a dollar that the world can count on. So that's what came out of the meetings. The only thing we need to see now is a world currency.
Do you mean money that we can count on, not the dollar per se, but just money in general?
That's
money
right.
system. Right, okay. Now, you, in the, what was it, the late 80s or early 90s, you released a documentary film where you put out a recording of Rothschild discussing all of this. How did you come across that recording?
After the meeting was over, after the 6 days of meetings that they had in Estes Park, Colorado, I got to know the people that recorded the meeting and asked them if I could buy copies of the meetings. They sold it to me for around $500 because there were decades of meetings, or I should say numbers of meeting tapes that didn't mean anything. All I wanted was the one on the World Conservation Bank meeting that I went to. And so I bought them all, kept the one that I wanted, and resold them to a chap that was interested in the environment for $500. So that's how I got hold of the tape, that people can hear Rothschild and what he said. The inside of the meeting is on my videos at my site, thebigbadbank.com.
Who is Maurice Strong, the Secretary General, convener of the Wilderness Congress, and what role did he play, and what was his background?
Okay. Maurice Strong is a Canadian. At 18, David Rockefeller met him through a Canadian that knew Morris Strong. Morris Strong had almost a supernatural understanding of the world. I suspect he may be in the Druid class. People will laugh when I say, yeah, Druid, aha. But if they go back to Druid Julius Caesar in their internet, they will see that Druids do exist. Well, let's get away from him being a Druid. In any case, he was appointed by David Rockefeller at 18 to carry the United Nations to a world administrative organization. And Maurice Strong has been behind the scenes in the United Nations, not behind them, in front of the scenes as Mr. United Nations since he was 18 under David Rockefeller's care. They met at Saratoga, New York, I think it was. There, a fellow named Wild Bill Henderson or something was the one that introduced Maurice Strong to David Rockefeller. So Maurice Strong is Mr. United Nations. He convened the meeting I went to. He is the head of the environment movement. They call him Mr. Environment in the United Nations. And he's one of the strongest political people in the world, Maurice Strong. And a lot of people haven't heard of the guy. He has a New Age ranch down in southern Colorado called the Baca. And it's also called the New Vatican. It's called, Crestone, Colorado. And there is a large group of New Age communities, Buddhist, Christian. The Jews aren't there, but they have established a ranch where all religions are accepted and so on, and they're standing over a huge aquifer of water in Crestone. It's called the San Luis Valley. It's the largest aquifer in the world, perhaps. They have billions of acre-feet of water running under the surface of Maurice Strong's ranch that are collected from the San Juan Mountains and the Sangre de Cristo Mountains in Colorado. Here he is, Mr. Environment, and he was secretly setting up a deal where he could draw water from this aquifer and send it to El Paso and San Francisco, Los Angeles. He was going to make billions a year from it, but I learned of what he was doing and blew the whistle on him, and the Colorado authorities stopped him in his tracks. So he was found out through my efforts, and he fled to Canada right away because he was in trouble in Colorado because he was caught red-handed. And since then, he has now gone to Beijing, China. He's Rothschild's man now in China and doing his dirty work to undermine the U.S. and get China as the main economic power in the world. So that's what he's doing now in Beijing. But did I answer any of your questions with that response of mine?
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about James Baker for a moment.
Okay. I don't know very much about him, but he was the Secretary of the Treasury when he was at the meeting in 1987. Later, he became Secretary of State. And James Baker, and I knew him personally from the meeting because I was an official host and talking to him and Maurice Strong, Edmund de Rothschild, the head of the bank. So I mean, my official host badge got me everywhere. And James Baker was there. He made a speech where he said that conservation requires growth and development. Well, there was a hum that went through the audience when he said that, because the environmentalists that were there, and there were a lot, World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, all those people were there. They were surprised that he would make such a statement that conservation required growth and development. Well, he was defining the concept of sustainable development in his speech. That is the name of the catchword that the United Nations is using to take over all of the water in the world, to take over all the food, pollution problems, everything like that is based on this concept of sustainable development. Kind of like, well...
you mean like planned obsolescence and things like that?
Yes, that kind of thing.
Because, it's funny, these elitists who come up with these plans, it's their business policies in the first place that pollute. It's their religious practices that they promote on the poor to control them, and all of these different factors, their wars and things, their nuclear energy programs, their suppression of things like industrial hemp that cause all of this pollution in the first place, and then they turn around and then they put it on us, really, to blame we the people as the cause of it.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. but I essentially said the same thing you did on a recent videotape that I have produced. They have not gone to the source of the pollution and said, clean this thing up. Instead, they've let industry run wild, and now they are making us the whipping boys, the common people. It's a dirty trick. It's a dirty trick.
Right.
And they're against us. The world order wants to get rid of people. In fact, world order documents that I have read, their goal is to get the population in the world down to 500 million people, 500 million. Well, right now they say that we're riding at 7 billion. That means that about 13.
Well, now let me ask you this: do you believe that number? Because I heard from a guest recently that there's been some academics looking into those numbers, and those numbers don't even hold up. That it's probably half that.
Half
Yeah.
that, huh?
Like if you went around and you added up all of the populations from the cities and countries and everything, that you wouldn't get, near what they claim. I haven't verified it myself, I should say, but I have been sent several references to look into in that regard.
Okay, now what you're saying is that they really have a lower figure than 500 million that they're churning around.
No. What I'm saying is that the figure of 6 or 7 billion that they claim right now is highly exaggerated by something that someone sent me last week that I'm saying that I haven't verified myself yet, but I was sent several sources to look into it. I
got it. In other words, that 7 billion figure stands to be audited to see if it's really true.
Exactly. It could be just a number that they're using to manipulate and sway everybody in their direction.
Exactly. Scare people and that sort of thing, and then have sustainable development come over to their side and say, well, look, how are we going to sustain Africa? Well, Africa could sustain itself if it weren't for the white bankers coming into their country.
We go into all of these countries and we steal their resources, and then we blame them for all the problems. Right.
Yeah.
That always boggled my mind, the hypocrisy. But I've always said that it's the elitists causing the damage and then blaming all of us for the damage that they cause, and then saying that we need to lower population. And it's like, Bill Gates going on TED Talks and talking about lowering the population through vaccines, and then, what was it, last March or May, he went on CNN saying that Dr. Wakefield had been proved a liar and all of this nonsense. If you go in and actually read Dr. Wakefield's book, Callous Disregard, you'll see that it was a kangaroo court against the guy. And on top of that, Wakefield has recently launched a lawsuit against Brian Deere, the journalist who filed the story, and Brian Deere was on the payroll of what's his name? The owner of Fox, and
the owner of Fox?
Yes.
Rupert
Murdoch. Rupert Murdoch. So.
It is Rupert, huh?
Yes.
He owns Fox. I didn't know that, so this is a good conversation for me.
But so. Anyway, the point is that here was Bill Gates going on the news actually promoting this lie about Dr. Wakefield, and anybody who's read Wakefield's book, which was published in the summer of 2010, knows that what Bill Gates was saying was a complete lie. And
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you are educating me. This is good that we're talking like this. I have not heard of this person. I'm sorry, I'm in different areas than you are. So, Wakefield, is that his name?
Yeah, Dr. Andrew Wakefield. He wrote a book called Callous Disregard. He's the one who got fired for saying that vaccines were related to autism, and he lost his medical license. because Dr. Richard Horton at the Lancet decided to come out and say that that Wakefield had faked the study, and Wakefield published all the letters with Dr. Horton, where Horton even agreed with Wakefield on the research, but Horton went out and basically created a kangaroo court because he was ordered to.
Wow.
And they destroyed Wakefield's career. And so Dr. Horton now has a lawsuit against him, and Brian Deere, the journalist who did the story, has a lawsuit against him as well.
Well, that's very interesting. I have evidence, pretty good evidence, and I won't go into it, that the smallpox vaccines that they administered to the Africans in the 1990s contain the AIDS virus, HIV. And
well,
they
are you familiar with, here's the thing. Are you familiar with Dr. Peter Duesberg's research?
No.
Well, Dr. Peter Duesberg was one of the so-called discoverers of the AIDS virus. And in the 90s or, I don't know, early 2000s, and I've had him on my show, but he came out and said that the AIDS virus was a complete fraud, that HIV does not cause it, that the African version of it, all they did was repackage malaria as AIDS so that they could draw attention and money into Africa. Oh. And even Kary Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize and he invented PCR DNA testing, has come out saying that AIDS is a fraud, as have a number of other researchers, including the inventor of AZT. Wow.
The AIDS virus, from what I understand, was isolated by Jonas Salk when he was exploring the cure or a preventive for polio. And he isolated it then, and then the scientists who are you're talking about apparently took it from there.
Well, I think it was the opposite. I think it was Duesberg who originally discovered it, and then Dr. Robert Gallo is the one who came out and said that it was something else, and Gallo has since been disproved, but they've been touting the whole HIV equals AIDS story, even though it was disproved 2 decades ago.
I'll be darned. See, I've been laboring under the misconception that Fort Detrick, Maryland, was the
well, sure. I think it was Leonard Horowitz, the dentist, who put out all of that research. But I think he was sued and lost and got a gag order put on him for putting out false information against Duesberg. But,
oh boy!
You know, I've interviewed Duesberg. You can hear his interview on my show, and he's been on Red Ice Radio recently as well. Also. But he'll go line by line with you through all the research and show you how they faked it and what the real cause was.
See, I listened to 2 other doctors that were epidemiologists who gave a different story than you just said. They said that the HIV virus is a bovine strain, that is not from monkeys, that because it's bovine, the rhesus monkey thing is a lie.
Yeah, well, the rhesus monkey thing, I think, was started by Leonard Horowitz, who I just mentioned, but Dr. Peter Duesberg, he was one of the original researchers involved in all of the AIDS research. He's professor of biology up at UC Berkeley, and since he went public with his research that AIDS was a fraud, they cut all of his funding.
Wow. Well, now when you say AIDS is a fraud, what does that mean? People get the AIDS virus, and
do they? Is that what they're getting? I mean, what is AIDS exactly? When you look at the research, the diseases that manifest from AIDS are many, many different things. And in every country, test for AIDS, the tests for AIDS in nearly every country are completely different by country. You cross a border, and the test for AIDS in the next country will be completely different. AIDS is the only quote-unquote virus that has a different test by location rather than by a virus. You know, it's polio virus. You have the exact same test for polio in every country on Earth. For malaria, you pick any other disease for that matter, and you're going to have exactly the same test. But
yes.
With AIDS, you have an arbitrary test that's given in every single country. And really what AIDS is, and like I said, I had Duisburg. I also had did a couple of shows on AIDS, but what AIDS is what they came out and said it was originally in the early 80s, that it's a disease that's almost entirely between HIV drug users and homosexual gay men that are regulars to the bathhouses, and that
it's passed on.
And hold on, it's not a virus that is passed on at all. What is being passed on is that you get too much foreign protein, let's say, to put it politely, into the bloodstream, because the anus only has one cell lining, whereas the vagina has 3. And so these things go into the bloodstream, and you have these guys who take amyl nitrates, who lower their T-cell count and their immune system down to 0, and they go have sex with 50 or 100 guys in a night, and that is what causes AIDS. It's the foreign protein in the bloodstream day after day, year after year that causes it. It's not any virus.
Okay. Well, you've taken me to a different plane of understanding. I appreciate this information. I should be interviewing you and learning. But in any case, the AIDS is a common problem. They say in Africa it is wasting people away. Whatever it is, it's probably dirty blood. But
well, no, it's called dirty water. Like I said, we used to call it malaria.
Yep.
If you look at AIDS in Africa, it's entirely different than AIDS in the United States. That's the issue. It's if you look at malaria and look at the African AIDS, AIDS does not transmit from male to female. If you're a woman, you only have a 1 in 1,000 chance of getting it from a male. So why is it that the African AIDS spreads to so many women? That's because it's not the same thing at all. What they're doing is they're using an arbitrary test, and it's malaria.
Okay. Let's stop talking about the AIDS thing at this point. I have to do some good reading. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll send you some information on that as well.
See, I made millions of dollars establishing a corporation that trained medical facilities around the United States on how to prevent blood-borne diseases and diseases that are caused by human body fluids. And that included HBV, HCV, AIDS, the HIV virus. So I was living, it looks like, in ignorance to a great extent when I was championing people protecting themselves from touching blood or body fluids.
Well, you still want to be careful, but what the issue is, there's still the risk of getting hepatitis or something like that as well. But the issue as how the AIDS story has been sold, there's some pretty big time researchers out there, and some very well put together documentaries about all of this as well that go into this. But I'd be happy to send you Dr. Peter Duisberg's contact information, and you can talk to him directly yourself.
Cool.
So, what's that?
Okay. Ask me some more questions.
Sure. Well, you were talking earlier about Maurice Strong. Why don't we talk about Haynes Strong and
Honey.
Or Honey Strong? Okay.
Yes.
Well, talk about her. What's her business all about?
Okay. She is in charge of the community in Crestone, Colorado, that they own 140,000 acres in their community, and she is the one that ties everything together into a religious incident that's going to happen someday. They say that Father God is going to mate with Mother Earth in their community, and that the New Age Christ is going to come forth from this divine union of God and Mother Earth. They're into Gaia, Mother Earth religion, that they should worship Mother Earth and not Father God. Well, that's what they're saying and so on, but that's where they're headed. They envision a community in the New World Order that will be more or less a feudal type of community that will take control of the world religion. That's a big statement. But
well, sure. Isn't that is that related to the Baha'i faith? Because I think the Baha'i or Baha'i faith has that same sort of agenda as well, to be the religion of the New World Order.
Yes, the Baha'is are right in line with the philosophy of Crestone, Colorado, and so are the Hindus and the Buddhists. And they have an Episcopal group there called Lindisfarne. Lindisfarne worships Satan. And Lindisfarne is also an offshoot of the Episcopal Church represented there. So, and the Catholics are there. Father Victor, I talked to him. I said, "What are you doing here, Father of this society?" And he says, "Oh, we just pray." I said, "What do you pray for?" He said, "Well, we pray that God will mate with Mother Earth." And I said, "Well, is this tied in with the Lindisfarne community that's here?" He says, "Oh, I don't know. We just pray." And so the Catholics have been given orders from the Pope. Father Victor told me that they were to pray. Oh, they pray the Lord's Prayer backwards in one of their rituals. They're just kind of a messed up Christian theology that has been assimilated into the New Age community. And that's where the world order is religiously. They're going to get people into worshiping Mother Earth. By the way, Edmund de Rothschild announced in the program that there's going to be a 300,000 conservation army that's going to be established. Now, I don't know if that's going to be another aspect of militia running society, or whether they're really going to be conservation freaks that are guarding water, keeping people away from fresh water and things like that. That's their plans. The National Council for Security and Environment met last week, January 18th, in Washington, D.C., and their suggestions that went up to the top of the United Nations is that the United Nations should take over the control of water over all local and federal people, that they should have the last word on how water's going to be distributed throughout the world. And what's going to happen, people can see my videotapes at the Big Bad Bank where I explain all of this. what their intention is to reduce the population through water, through the control of water. They could add chemicals to the water to reduce the population. They could redirect the water from its natural cycles and ruin the environment and indigenous people. They've got all kinds of evil plans that are written around this convention they had 2 weeks ago, January 18th. They're on their way now. The United Nations then is going to create huge projects to help society, they say, that's going to put the control of large amounts of water into their control through dams and so on, where they will violate the societies not only by raising the cost of water, but by reducing its availability. That's why I'm nervous about fracking. Fracking can introduce petroleum products into our water supplies, underground water, surface waters, and ruin the water so that it can't be, and so that it won't be potable. It'll be poisoned water. And that's what they have in mind now, to reduce the availability of water to society. And I have 3 videotapes short ones called Water Everywhere on my site. They could put in Water Everywhere George Hunt into Google and Google videos, and they'll probably get my Water Everywhere series, where I talk about this thing in detail. And it's going on. Our society is being put into a net of control by the elite.
Absolutely. I do agree with you. Have you considered wheat? W-H-E-A-T?
W-H?
Wheat, like what you make bread with?
Sure. What about it?
Well, wheat is a poison.
A poison?
Wheat is a poison.
Oh, come
80 to 90% of the population cannot eat wheat. Wheat causes diabetes, obesity, heart disease, eczema, psoriasis, acne, dandruff, and many other various diseases that if people stopped eating wheat, half of the people in the allopathic hospitals would go home tomorrow.
Amazing.
In fact, there's a very good book by Dr. William Davis. In fact, I had him on my show last month, or at the beginning of January sometime. But he's got a new book out that's on the New York Times bestseller list called Wheat Belly. And he and I had a conversation about this very topic, that if somebody wanted to kill millions of people while reaping huge profits at the same time off of the medical complications, that wheat would be absolutely perfectly engineered to do the job. Good
Lord. I was brought up on a wheat ranch in California, and here I thought we were doing great things for society.
Well, it looks that sometime in the 50s they switched wheat to a shorter strain that grows a lot faster, and that is when the real damage comes. But traditionally speaking, wheat was used to hold you over during times of famine. It wasn't supposed to be a daily staple because it makes you sick, and your body over time can't handle it. It's you can handle a little poison and your body will take it out, but if you get poison every day, it builds up and it affects you. And
I see.
But for instance, I have celiac disease, and if I eat wheat, I'll be sick tomorrow. And my father-in-law, he has type 2 diabetes. He stopped eating wheat, and within 2 to 3 weeks, he was almost completely off of his insulin.
Good Lord.
Yep.
Well, that is... your group outshines me with your research. I've been studying your site, and you really go into things very, very deeply, and I respect you for that. My information is like, whoa, I'm in the middle of something that I don't understand, and then I am confronted with these situations in real life, and that's where mine comes from, not from research. Of course, after I saw that meeting in real life, I did my research on banking and international finance. But I didn't reach as far into these areas as you folks have. You know, you outshine me as far as research is concerned. But I outshine the others because I was there at the meeting.
Well, sure, and I hope you don't mind if I play your recording of the meeting of Rothschild speaking at during this the release of this interview.
Not a bit. Not a bit. I appreciate you doing that. I feel driven by a supernatural force to that my goal, the reason I am here is to educate the people about what I know. And it's catching on. A lot of people are beginning to say, whoa, what's going on in our society?
Absolutely.
That's my job.
I was going to ask you, George, why don't you tell us what Maurice Strong had to say about Rothschild in his introductory speech?
He said that there was no better person, which means that Rothschild is the top man in the world, in Maurice Strong's opinion. He says there's no better person. He has expressed in his own life his desire for conservation and development to be controlled. And then Maurice said, Edmund de Rothschild is the positive synthesis of the environment on one hand and sustainable development on the other. In other words, Rothschild, his group controls the environment movement and the banking movement and industry. Everything is in the dynasty of Rothschild's hands. And their moves since then have corroborated with what Maurice Strong said about Rothschild when he was introducing him. There is no better person, he said. And then I had lunch with the World Bank president just a half an hour before this meeting, and I said to Michael Sweetman, I said, you know, there's something wrong with this bank. You've given the wilderness areas of the world, 33% of the Earth's land, to this bank as an asset, and you've taken the third world debt. As they're paying it off, it will go into this bank. And I said, I talked to the Brazilian finance minister here, and he says there's no way they can pay off their $200 billion debt, which is, Michael, I said, where is the earnings engine in this bank that's going to produce the dividends and interest to run the bank? And he said, we're working on that. I said, you're working on this, and you're going to have a meeting in a half an hour where you're going to pronounce this bank into existence? And he said, we're working on that. I said, okay, Michael. He said, you can express your concerns at the meeting that we're going to have in a half an hour. I said, I looked him in the eye. I said, you're going to call on me, Michael? You're going to call him? He says, yes, I promise. I actually said, look me in the eye, Michael, are you going to call on me? And he said, yes, I promise. He didn't call on me. And it was at that point where I said, okay, Lord, he owes me one. I'm going public on what's going on here. In the meantime, 5 people of my hosts that were there were 25 of us. 5 of them came up to me and they said, George, we have a message for you. And I said, okay, what is it? They said, it came from David Rockefeller. And he said, David Rockefeller said, if you don't keep your mouth shut, you're going to regret it. So it gave me even more impetus to get the word out. And that's where I've been since 1987. For almost 25 years, I've been working on this in the public.
What did Rothschild say in his speech? And who was Michael Sweetman, the initial president of the World
Yes.
Conservation Bank?
Yes. The Rothschild giving the control of the bank to Michael Sweetman at the meeting where I was is in my videotapes at thebigbadbank.com. He said, Michael Sweetman, you had the he had this very Oxfordian English accent, Rothschild did. He said, Michael Sweetman, you have that in your belly that will allow you to produce the new World Bank for Finance and Development. And that, and then you hear the people clap and so on. Well, I was there when they heard that. I was at the meeting, and I looked around, and there were people there that had their right hands held up when he announced that, as if to say, Sieg Heil. So there's a fascist influence in this whole World Conservation Bank, New World Order situation. Fascist.
Who was Gro Harlem Brundtland, and what did he have to do with the World Health Organization and the rest of it?
Okay, Gro is a she. Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was one of those people groomed to help the world order come up through the United Nations to get their water and food to get these things into the UN and up to the top. She's the head of the United Nations Committee for Environment and Development, UNCED it's called, UNCED. Perhaps being a grammatical joke that this thing is secret, UNCED, okay? She's the head of the UNCED committee, and that's the one that Rothschild controls in the United Nations. And Gro Harlem Brundtland, being the head of the committee, is the one that gets what Rothschild wants done in the United Nations, with the help of Maurice Strong, who is essentially Mr. United Nations, and Mr. David Rockefeller. He represents Rothschild and Rockefeller. In fact, Maurice Strong was the one that brought Edmund de Rothschild to the meeting in an SUV. I don't know. See, the Rothschilds keep their presence a secret all the time, as much as they can, because they know that there's a lot of people that would like to pick them off, I think. So Maurice Strong was the custodian that protected Edmund de Rothschild at the meeting. When David, I was at a meeting at the United Nations and or at one of these committees, and suddenly I was listening to the speaker, and suddenly I felt a power come into the room, and I said, "What was that?" And I turned around on my seat, and there was David Rockefeller. He was moving down the aisle, right by me, and then he went over to a person that was seated over in a corner somewhere, and that was Edmund de Rothschild. So I saw David Rockefeller shaking hands with Edmund de Rothschild, the two mightiest bankers in the world, and then they went about their own business. Rockefeller made a speech about sustainable development and how we really need to produce, but we also need to think about pollution and so on. He made his speech, and then the next day, David Rockefeller made a speech to the CFR, the Council of Foreign Relations in Denver, to their group. And on that same Monday, Edmund de Rothschild made his pronouncements to the audience that there was going to be a new bank, a new world order, this is where we're going, and so on. So I saw the whole show, and I have recordings of it, and it's the only one in existence that I can tell, because the people that took the original tapes at the meeting dispensed with all of these archives in the 21 years that had expired. And when I contacted them, I said, "Hey, can I get some more of those tapes of the meeting?" And they said, "Well, we don't have any of that anymore." So I've got the only tape, and I ran with it. I did the best I could. I mean, here you are. You heard about me, and we don't know each other from the blue, but somehow my information got to you, and your information got to me.
Sure.
And here we are.
Well, it
talking
took 20
about
years, but
it took 20 years. Yeah, that's true. I've been around for 25 years, shouting to the housetops all about this, like John the Baptist, a voice crying in the wilderness.
So what made you decide to take all of this stuff public?
Well, this is where you're going to think I'm a little crazy. But in 1972, see, I became a Christian in the early 70s, and in 1972 I received a voice from somewhere, and I wrote it down. The voice said, "We are going on an adventure into the wilderness. I am going to loose you upon the ravenous beasts of the earth." And it was a prophecy that I wrote in my Bible, but I forgot about it. And then in 1992, I said, "My goodness, he did take me on an adventure into the wilderness, the Fourth World Wilderness Congress. And yes, I am being loosed upon the ravenous beasts of the earth." Maurice Strong, Edmund de Rothschild, David Rockefeller, they're the ravenous beasts. So maybe I'm reading something into it, but I think I am decreed by a supernatural force to do what I'm doing. That it is a work of a higher power than me. So I probably lost 99% of your audience on that one, but I thought I better bring it out to answer your question.
So what is your motive?
Oh, I don't have a motive. My motive is to educate, period. I have information, and for some reason this information has to keep going out to people so they can put it all together. It's strictly education. I don't want to be a Jesus Christ. I don't want to be a Mark Twain, or I hope I'm divorced from ego in this thing. Although it sure makes me feel good when people like you catch on and I can talk to you over a telephone.
How familiar are you with Walter Burrian's research on the comprehensive annual financial reports?
I just ran into that through a conversation with you, as a matter of fact, and I reviewed his site, and I think that he's on to something that is going to rock the financial world once people catch on that there are pension fund monies floating around that we don't know about.
In the trillions.
In the trillions.
So, do you think that these bankers doing all of this can be stopped?
No, No, I think at this point only a divine intervention could help the world from going.
So then what's the point then if you think only divine intervention? Because to me personally, I think we need a whole lot less wishing for a supernatural entity to come and take care of things, and I think we need to stand up and take action. And so if you're waiting for a supernatural spirit to handle it all, then what's the point?
Well, I am the servant of a supernatural entity, and I just wake up in the morning, spend my money on education. I've got over $300,000 of my retirement money invested in my work of creating videos to tell people, to educate people. That's what I do, and I'm just about out of money. So if you know anybody with $1 million, let them give them my name, would you? I just educate.
Right. All right. So, what, in your opinion, can the citizens do if you think that nothing can be done?
That's a good question. Am I my brother's keeper? And are they going to hear what I have to say and put it together and do something about it? They could, but I know the American mind now, and it is very, very dull. And they're not listening. They're going to sites where they can see Mickey Mouse and so on.
Do you think that the American population has been intentionally dumbed down?
Yes. I think they've done it with fluoride, among other things.
Well, what about, have you looked at the American education, such as the work of John Taylor Gatto and how they brought in the Prussian education system?
Yes, I have read about education systems that have been foiled with, and I go on to my own work. I read about them, but I do not research into it and read books about it and so on. My work is international banking, conservation, pollution, water, food, minor things like that. See, I'm in a big macro area, and you're in a micro area, and we need both. You say, well, if we can't do anything about it,
well, I think the key way to wake the population up is dealing with the education system and teaching people how to think again. Because if they've been intentionally dumbed down, then and going to the population, they're not hearing us or hearing the message or whatever. Then it seems to me that the education has to be reformed so that they can hear the message and begin to think again. So that's why I bring that up, but I also think that the CAFR issue is a very macro issue as well there that's not being talked about and is a global issue. It's not something that's happening just here in the United States. It's how they're siphoning the money out of the United States to do what they do elsewhere and use these funds, our own money, against us that they steal from us.
Sure. Yeah, you're right there. But don't we have a responsibility? Oh, okay. Let's take this one step backward. You're onto something in the education system that's wrong, and you are. Okay. I don't know about your research, but it's wrong. So then you decide to go public with this information. That takes a long time. It's taken me 25 years to reach you. How long do you think it would take to change the education system in the United States?
Well, there's a very large grassroots movement sweeping the country right now, and John Taylor Gatto's been out there promoting his work on education since the early 90s.
What's changed?
Well, a lot more people are becoming aware of it, and a lot more people are homeschooling. I think those are the two of the biggest issues that need to happen. But certainly there are a lot more that need to get the word and understand exactly how they are manipulating the education system. Charlotte Iserbyt has gone public with documents from the Reese Commission showing exactly how they do it as well.
All right. So a few years later, things begin to move, and then it becomes, let's say, a congressional issue. Then Congress fights about it. They put it in the bill. They do this. They do that. Your efforts, I'm afraid, are not going to bear the fruit that we really need in America to change America and the world, because it's
well, I think you're basing your decision off of not having seen the research and what we're doing first, which I would have to disagree with at its premise.
Okay. Well, I got about an hour into his 3.5-hour thing, and finally I said, well, I see where he's leading to, but I don't have another 2.5 hours. So here's a guy that's right in harmony with you on these issues, and I didn't even take the time to go through the whole thing that he wanted to explain in 3.5 hours.
Which one were you viewing? I'm not sure which one you were viewing there.
Okay, when corporation, whatever it was, came up.
Okay, well, that's completely okay. The corporation nation is one thing, but I was talking about John Taylor Gatto's research on education, which is entirely separate from that. Obviously they overlap because the school boards and the school districts are run on the same information, but I'm talking about exactly how they use education to dumb people down versus a local example of how the financial system is actually constructed and how it actually works. So, if people want to actually understand how it works so that they are empowered to take action, then they're going to need to study it. That's all there is to it. If we have, more ignorance, then nothing is going to get resolved, absolutely.
Exactly, and that's why I'm strictly an educator, hoping that somebody out there is a spark that will set something off. Okay, so I do have an inner feeling that maybe we can change it. That's why I continue at it. But I don't think we're going to change the direction of the New World Order. No way. No way. Unless
I guess I have to disagree, because otherwise I wouldn't do what I do, and I wouldn't educate people unless I thought that there was a hope that we could actually wake them up and empower people to take action. So, to me, it just seems a contradiction to even do any of this if there's absolutely no hope to accomplish anything.
Well, maybe there is that I don't know about, you don't know about. Maybe there's a higher power than us that wants us to do this.
Well, see, that's where I disagree, is I think we need to take action ourselves and not wait for some supernatural entity to come down and save us. I think it's time to really take action and dig our feet in, and that's where you and I can agree to disagree, and I'll have to leave you to Jesus on that one. But I think it's really time for people to wake up and take action and not wait for something outside of us, some unknown thing to come and rescue us. I don't think that that's the solution that we need. Do you want to explain the components of the forthcoming World Conservation Bank and what is included there?
Yes. We have these banks that are too big to fail, as they say. They are really a confederacy right now. They're in confederate operations with the Rothschild Bank. So we have a de facto one world bank. The only thing is they can't create their own currency. And that's where, and they don't have a world reserve bank. And you're going to get people like the Vatican involved in the final operation of putting this bank together. You're going to get Banco Ambrosiano, Citicorp. All of these banks are going to converge together at some momentous day, probably when the whole world is in chaos with their financial systems, and they're going to take that crisis to establish this bank.
Why have the aristocrats joined themselves into the conservation movement?
They are going to be the people who keep the bank going. You see, there's no earnings engine in the bank, as I explained earlier, so they're going to have to depend on input of private funds into the bank, into the back of the bank. That is, they're going to become stockholders of the bank. The bank is going to sell stock to get money. And eventually, when the World Conservation Bank goes bankrupt, which it will, the stockholders, the very rich elite, will come in and take over the bank, as is done in international law, and then they will be the owners of all of the mortgages. Everything that has been pledged to that bank will become the property of the elite. And they will own the bank through the bank going under, and then they will come in and take over the bank. And that's how the elite will be infused into this world order.
Why are you so concerned about the concept of one world bank? And why should we all be concerned, for that matter?
Whoever controls the currency controls the people, right?
Well, sure.
I mean, yeah, money is the currency of commerce and everything. Well, when they own this bank, they will have complete control over every country, and they can ruin the soft currencies of Nigeria, say, and play with them with their control over the currencies. They'll have world control if they have world banking control, and that's their scheme. They're going to take us over environmentally. They're going to own our fresh water. They're going to own all of our resources coming out of the earth, and we'll be slaves to them. At the same time, we have Facebook and Google and all those people supposedly competing with one another, but they are in cohorts. What's the word? Cahoots. They're in cahoots with each other with this plan that they all share in common. They know, but we don't know. The public doesn't know what they're doing. And one day we'll have one bank, and we'll all rejoice and say, "Oh, good, there's peace and prosperity now." But it's really a trap that we're going to be guided into. A trap of our finances, trap of our water, our food. Everything's going to be out of the UN.
So why do we continue to empower these people in the first place? Why do we continue to believe in them and give them authority over us? Why don't we just stop and turn around and stop feeding their lies and their vampirist sucking of our energy? Why not just ignore them and turn the other way?
Well, you can do that on an individual basis, and I hope people do. But in a total takeover of the world order by the common man, it's not going to happen. The common man is not prepared. We don't have a leader. We don't have an agenda.
Why would you want another leader, though? It seems like putting leaders in power and giving people authority over us is what continually gets us back into this problem. So why continually give others our authority? Why not stop this nonsense of giving other people rule over us and take our autonomy back?
Because they have rule over us now, and we can't get it back. They're too big.
So what would that take to get it back?
It takes education of the masses day by day, hoping against hope that something will come along that will change this. That's my attitude as I go
But
into this.
isn't it the act of informing them and waking them up the very thing that's going to make that happen?
Exactly.
So then we don't really need hope for that, which is a fallacy. What we need is that action and education and spreading the message out there so that people can get it and wake up.
Well, I've read newspapers back to 1908, 1900, and they were saying the same things that you and I are saying way back then, and nothing changed. They knew there was an octopus called Rockefeller. They wrote a book about exposing the family in 1933. They exposed the World War I a con job between Israel and the Rothschilds and the Balfour Amendment. They knew all that. They were protesting it, but nothing has happened. Nothing's happened.
Well, so then enough people haven't woken up then. So it seems that a different path of action needs to be taken, because if we're trying to solve the problem at the same level it was created, then we're not going to resolve it. So it seems to me that we need to have a higher perspective of the issue and handle it from a higher state of awareness than we have been. Instead of trying to fix it from 5,000 feet, maybe we need to go up to 30 or 50,000 feet and see what we can see from there and then take action.
Well, what you're proposing is that a new Tea Party be established that's going to change all of these government...
Why a Tea Party? Why a party at all? It seems to me that we need to completely leave the dialectic of this ridiculous political system behind. And, it's not in any party. It's not in any Republican or Democrat. It's not in Ron Paul, whose bill is a complete fake. It's not in any of that stuff. The people have to take their autonomy back. We have to stop feeding in to the political parties and the politicians. We have to stop giving them our energy. And along with that is their money that they create out of thin air and steal our work. So,
okay.
How
are you going to do this?
Well, I'm not going to do it by myself, but hopefully one day, and there's that hope fallacy, but, by taking action and getting enough people educated and waking up to the work of people like Clint Richardson and Walter Burrian and Larkin Rose and the trivium that we teach here, and, Richard Grove's work at Tragedy and Hope and everyone else that we work with, hopefully we'll be able to spread the word by due diligence and educate people so that they make informed decisions rather than basing their actions on hope and on the things that haven't worked in the past. But
well, that's what I'm doing. I'm contradicting myself, I know. Here I am working that we can overcome through education, and at the same time I'm saying we're not going to overcome because they're too big.
Well, I don't care how big they are. See, that's the thing, is they're an illusion. There's a children's movie out called The Bug's Life, and I like to refer to this movie often. And in this cartoon, it's about a group of ants, an ant hill, and they're taken over by a bunch of locusts, a bunch of grasshoppers. And the grasshoppers basically make all of these ants do their work and feed them and supply them everything, and the grasshoppers come along and steal everything all the time. But eventually one of the ants starts waking up, and he starts waking some of the other ants up, and eventually all of the ants just stop participating. That's the real issue, is we need to stop participating in their game. But let me ask you this. Let's continue on with our questions here.
Okay.
Do you think that other banks will continue to exist in this World Conservation Bank, or after it comes to pass, and do we want them to exist?
There will be branches of the World Conservation Bank everywhere, and I imagine that they'll have regional controls and local controls and things like that. I don't have any set idea about how the World Conservation Bank will continue. It'll all be by the seat, because the money that they'll issue won't be really supported by anything. 1/3 of the Earth's wilderness areas, that's not going to produce dividends. I don't know how they're going to pull it off, but the people will believe it, and they'll love it, and they'll do everything Rothschild wants them to.
So what if we taught people how to see through all of the fallacies and mind control that's used against them instead of buying into all the fallacies and believing everything that Rothschild says? I mean, screw Rothschild. What does he have? All we have to do is teach people a little bit of logic and how to spot logical fallacies, and they can see right through that stuff. And you can teach a group of 1,000 people how to spot the fallacies in a half hour.
Okay. And then they're going to quit banking, or they're going to quit.
Well, the idea is for people to be able to see through the fallacies and how they're being manipulated instead of buying into all of this rhetoric fed to us by Rothschilds and by your local city council that has its hidden kaffir while they selectively provide us the budget. We have to stop buying into that stuff and stop giving them the authority. And I think that's really going to be the only way to handle this, and that's going to be through education and taking action and hard work and getting people literally to wake up that this political system that we're in is not our friend, and we just need to turn away and turn around and walk away from it completely.
Yeah, it sounds like a real good story. It's a real good story, and suddenly the people wake up, and Hamlin is saved.
Well, I'm not saying anything about suddenly. I was saying through hard work and diligence and educating people so that people realize that they're being fooled and manipulated and having 40% of their income at least stolen every year by this group of mobsters. If this was a gang in your local neighborhood doing this and taking your money and demanding everything, people wouldn't stand for it. But because somehow this false idea of authority is placed on this gang called government, we give them that authority, and we think it's actually morally wrong not to hand over our stuff to them. So, what we need to do is educate people that the gang in the street peddling drugs is no different than the gang that, is up on Capitol Hill. They're both gangs, they're both thugs, they're both stealing our money,
Well, I think you're riding on a crest of hope as much as I am.
I realize that it's going to take a huge amount of work, and I'm not just relying on hope. I'm doing it based on work and getting people like Larkin Rose's research out there and Clint Richardson's and the Trivium education system, which we get. The Trivium education work that we've done has gone out to millions of people in the last 6 months. So it is taking hold, and we can create memes that do take hold and do wake up and educate people. So it's not all just empty hope. It's based on action and education.
A few months ago, I was informed by Google that I had 6 million hits on my sites. That's a lot of hits. Well, it's going to take you and me and that guy down the street and that guy down the street with 6 million hits to change perhaps the consciousness of the people. But we don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the understanding. We're talking to a mob of people who don't give a darn in the beginning. They're just worried about if they're going to have beans or chicken for dinner tonight. They're worried about their local lives. They don't listen. They don't listen. I've had a free video offer on my site since I began, and only 3 people have asked for it. They don't care. The people we're talking to don't have ears to hear. But we're doing it anyway. And that's where faith becomes works. And I have been working at this for 25 years. Clear, talking to people, giving speeches, traveling across, going to New Zealand, educating the Seventh-day Adventists over there, Canada, Vancouver. I've been everywhere. Went over to Asia to talk to the Muslim people. I talked to this Muslim guy, and he said, "Oh no, Christianity is wrong." I said, "Okay, did Muhammad rise from the dead? No. Did the Virgin Mary rise from the dead? No. Did Jesus Christ rise from the dead? Yes. Well,
as far as the story is concerned, but the onus of proof is on those believers who believe that story. But let's get back on track to the conversation on Banks and the Rothschilds. In your opinion, or have you had any repercussions against your work?
Oh, they sued me for $500,000 in libel because I spoke against the Conservation Bank president, Michael Sweetman, when I told the public that he had broken his promise to me. And I said to them, well, fine, if you want to sue me, great, but I'd like to tell this story to 6 jurors and a judge, and I think they'll know what's going on. And I never heard from them after that. They dropped the suit.
So what is the timetable for the bank that's been laid out?
I've been wrong every year. I always thought it was this year. The timetable, people could grab on to December 21st, 2012. I think that might just be a figment of our gross imagination.
Oh, yeah, I can tell you exactly who created that whole meme, too.
Who was it?
Oh, Terence McKenna, Jose Arguelles, and they took it from a misquote out of Professor Michael Coe's book on the Maya from Yale University that was published in 1967. The first instance of it was put out by Leonard Nimoy on the premiere episode of the In Search of television show, and it just kind of grew from there into a meme over the years, and being primarily promoted by Terence McKenna and Jose Arguelles. So,
this subject backwards. I'm embarrassed that I'm being interviewed by you because, you're light years ahead of me on these things.
Well, we all have to start somewhere. It's just about, we have a systematic method that we use called the trivium for fact-checking information and verifying things. And once you get a hold of how the system works, it makes research and getting yourself educated on certain topics much quicker and easier. And it helps you spot the lies that people are trying to feed you to mislead you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's an ancient system, really, that was developed in large part by Aristotle and Pythagoras way back in the day. And it's taught to the elite in the Ivy League schools so that they can use it against us. And what we do is we teach the same system that the Ivy League kids get. We teach it to everyone so that they can all have the same tools and level the playing field.
Got it. Okay.
What do you think that? Go ahead.
I mean, what you're doing is good. I'm sorry that I have to be so defeatist in where our efforts are leading us, but I just don't believe that we can stop it. It's just too big.
Yeah. Well, I think that if we don't, it's, I don't think that the elites are competent or intelligent enough. They're clearly irrational and incapable of using proper critical thinking. And to put the fate of humanity in the greediest, most dishonest of us all seems a sad fate for the planet Earth. So I think human intelligence will win over, and it's just the due diligence of working and getting the information out there to everyone that's going to be required. And part of getting them to wake up is realizing that their education system at the core that they were given as children was manipulated as well. And from there, it sort of expands out. Once they're aware of logical fallacies, they can begin to see how the rest of the lies are being used against them on a daily basis.
We did that with global warming, didn't we? I mean, there was enough pressure from people like you and me about global warming not being a valid concept to where the Rothschilds have had to back up
Sure. Well, didn't they change it from global warming to climate change, right? So they had to remarket the whole thing, and and sure. So it is possible to create memes, and today with the internet and anybody being able to put your own movie out and create your own meme right off your computer desktop, I think it's very possible to happen. So I don't put as much faith in these idiotic elite locusts as I do the rest of humanity that are being duped into believing these guys, and I see more and more people waking up all the time to how the whole scam works. What exactly will the 300,000 member Conservation Corps do? And tell us about the Conservation Corps. Are they tree huggers, or is it like the old Jerry Brown thing in the California Conservation Corps? What's the deal there?
Well, it wasn't expanded upon at the conference. It was written in the decrees of what Rothschild was going to do, and included in there was a 300,000 Conservation Corps. I don't know if it's going to be militia, if it's going to be tree huggers that go out and tell on people that are stealing water. I don't have a concept of how that army is going to be brought about. I'm ignorant.
And an article about the Club of Rome appears in your manual. How would you fit that in with the World Wilderness Scheme?
Okay. The Club of Rome is dedicated to reducing the population. That's one of their goals. And the Fourth World Wilderness, the Wilderness Scheme, is to eradicate most of the cannon fodder. That's what they called us at the conference. We are the cannon fodder. They said, let's not educate the cannon fodder about this bank, the cannon fodder that unfortunately populates the earth. So the elite have been taught to dislike the common man, and they have good reasons to, I'll have to admit, because the common man can be pretty sloppy. But
again, the common man is sloppy because he's been intentionally dumbed down by the Prussian education system that they brought into power, and they only consider those profane who are not educated in the trivium and the great books of the Western world. So by removing the great books and by removing the trivium, they create these, a class of society that they can walk on and look down on. So
you're right.
The premise of their actions is absurd in the first place. I mean, it's like I love this quote from Sir Thomas More. Let me read you this here. He says, "For if you the rulers suffer your people to be ill-educated, and their manners to be corrupted from their infancy, and then punish them for those crimes to which their first education disposed them, what else could be concluded from this, but that you first make thieves and outlaws, and then punish them?"
Yeah, that's right. We've been taught, you're saying, to be dumbed down. And
we have been dumbed down. Once you understand what the trivium is and how they intentionally took it away and took it out of our education systems. See, that's what the old single-room schoolhouses were built on, was the trivium. It was a special kind of education that came out of the Middle Ages and the Classical Ages, and it's a systematic method of learning and teaching yourself how to learn things. And by them removing this education, they were able to dumb everybody down. It's not that they're better than us or have better genes than us or their bloodlines and all of this nonsense. It's that they send their children to special schools which teach their kids the liberal arts or the liberating arts, versus everyone else is taught the servile and the mechanical arts. There's a reason why it was called the 7 liberal arts, because the word liberal means ever befitting the free. It doesn't mean slavery or tax and spend communism and all of this other nonsense. The word liberal means ever befitting the free, and what they did was they took the 7 liberal arts, or the liberating arts, and they misconstrued them, they took them out of order, and they hid them from everybody so that people couldn't think properly to see how they do this stuff. And it's, this is why education is so important. It has nothing to do with anything. They're not, like I said, they're not better than us in any other way other than the education that they give their children.
Yep. Educate means to lead out, leading
exactly.
Parents.
Exactly.
And they're not doing it. I agree with you.
Well, they're doing it with their own children, but not with the rest of us.
So we have tasks of changing people's ideas about economics, changing people's ideas about education, instituting those changes. Can we do that? Can we do that?
Oh, I think we can.
We can, but it's all based on hope.
No, it's not.
Hope.
See, that's where we keep going wrong, because if we keep going back to the Obama hope fallacy, this is where we run into trouble. We have to take action. We have to educate and take action and go one person at a time. It's not hope or supernatural entities that's going to get us there. It's taking action and getting out there and pounding the street and doing our work. And that's all that it's going to take.
Well, I would say your progress in doing what you're doing is as valid as my progress doing what I'm doing.
Well, sure, but we're both doing work, though. That's the thing. We're both taking action, because if you did what you said, and if you believed what you actually said, that there was no hope, then you would just go sit on your couch and forget the whole thing. But deep down inside you, you know that there is a chance, and so you keep pushing for it, and that's the whole idea. That's the point.
You're right. You're right. But I'm depending on an entity outside of myself to drive my hope into perhaps some kind of manifestation that we beat these guys. And my hope doesn't extend that far that we're going to beat these guys. They're always a step ahead of us. And they have the ability to undo any good that we can do just with a swipe of a law or of a
but if we no longer give authority to their laws, then they're going to be screwed. See, that's why people need to really wake up to the fallacy of authority and stop giving other people authority to run our lives. And that's going to be the biggest issue. But I think, if we had a few major shows get a word out like that overnight, you could have 10 or 20% of the population wake up in one night. But it's going to take, somebody in some TV or radio station somewhere to do the right thing one of these days. But why don't you tell us about the Gaia Earth religion and how that is being used to control everyone?
Okay. Yoga is the essential area where people are going to meet Father God and Mother Earth. The yoga people are like plants. The religion is based around plants. When you put your butt on that ground, those chakra centers begin to ignite and so on. And they say that's the energy coming from the ground up into their lotus, which is the seventh chakra. That kind of religion is going to be inculcated into our children via Facebook, education in the schools, and so on. They're going to embrace Gaia, Mother Earth, as their God.
Now, isn't the religion of Gaia, such as created by, what was his name, James Lovelock, isn't that confusing things a bit, or conflating them with an Eastern meditation practice such as yoga, which is really exercise and meditation and stretching and things and clearing the mind? And
yes.
I perfectly understand about the Fabian socialists and using New Age religions to control and manipulate people, but I think that you're doing a bit of conflating there by mixing yoga, a yogic meditation practice in with that.
Well, yoga is Eastern, and Christianity, Judaism, Muslim is Western. Will you accept that basic?
I mean, most of the Middle East is technically in Asia, if you look at it continentally speaking. But yeah, I can, But see, here's the thing: is Lovelock was American, and the Fabian socialists came out of England and Scotland and the U.S., and they're the ones that have used the New Age religion as a second catchweb to ensnare people that escape the primary dogmas.
Okay, that could be, but let me just go one step further. Crestone, Colorado, is on the Sangre de Cristo Range. In other words, it's at the spine of the United States. And Maurice Strong and Honey Strong have developed the lie that Crestone is at the point where the Eastern religions meet the Western religions at that point. So therefore, they're saying that this is the place where Father God and Mother Earth are going to unite to create the world religion, because it's at the point where the East and the West religions meet.
Interesting concept. Going back to the ancient European and Middle Eastern fertility cults, it sounds, which are the old fertility cults and those themes are quite ancient and global in most of the ancient religions around the world, including Judeo-Christianity for that matter. Where do you think we should go from here?
Just keep educating. Maybe that higher power of the people will respond to our efforts. Maybe there's a higher power up in heaven that will respond to our efforts, and maybe there will be no higher power, and all of our desires will evaporate as the world order takes over. It could go three ways. It could go your way through education, and it'll catch on in the people, which I don't believe. Or it could go my way, that there's a higher power that's just letting us diddle-daddle with our own efforts, and maybe there will be a coming before everything disintegrates. Who knows? I am a faithful person, so if any help comes, I see that it has to come from above. You are not of that thinking, and you think that the change may come from below. Let's just ride on our own little imaginations and keep educating and keep trying to change things, and maybe one of us will be right. I don't give up. Even though I've given up, I don't give up.
Absolutely. And what is the single most important concept you would like people to take away from this interview?
That we've been had. We've been lied to.
Yeah, we've been had really good.
It's our fault.
It's brilliant. I mean, the scheme is brilliant. I got to give them credit for the audacity and the sheer... just the sheer audacity of being able to pull off a lie like this. And, of course, Hitler told us, the bigger the lie, the more people will believe it.
That's right.
It's people are just so stupid that the government would never lie to them and this type of stuff. But every time throughout history, if people would just read a damn book, they would see that conspiracies happen repeatedly over and over, and that the people get screwed out of everything over and over and over throughout history, typically by their governments. And it's the governments that go around and cause all these wars and go around and kill all the people so that they can loot and everything else. And it's time for people to wake up and just say enough is enough already.
Back in 1908, they asked Lord Bertrand Russell, one of the highest intellects, one of the greatest atheists, they said, Lord Bertrand Russell, what is the problem in humanity? And he thought for a while. He says, people don't think.
Well, I think Bertrand Russell was one of the people that was promoting the whole dumbing down of education, which my partner Richard Andrew Grove has gone into that area of research quite often. And
he knew people didn't think,
yeah.
and he approached it that way.
He did.
Hey, I've enjoyed talking with you on this show. I know I didn't show the prowess that you expected from a person of my learning, but maybe we will spark the light of freedom in people's hearts again. Who knows?
Well, I sure hope so, George. It was good speaking to you, and have a great day, and thank you so much for coming on Gnostic Media.
You're a smart hombre, and I really enjoy the education that I got. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.